And away we go. Let's see what goes on in this world today. Rob Reiner once made a film with his son Nick, now suspected of killing parents. Oh, that's awful. Very awful. Nick Reiner, 32, is suspected of killing his parents, director Rob Reiner, and his wife Michelle Singer Reiner, and is in custody on a $4 million bond. In 2016, Rob Reiner directed a semi-autobiographical film called Being Charlie, co-written by his son Nick, about Nick's struggles with drug addiction and homelessness. At the time of the film's release, Nick spoke about his strained relationship with his father, growing up, and how the movie-making process brought them closer together. Firstly, rest in peace, Rob Reiner, and I send my condolences to Rob Reiner's friends and family. Secondly, uh, based off what I just read, now of course, it's still awful that Rob Reiner's no longer alive anymore, and there is already investigations underway regarding that. Nonetheless, the details already known to the public is quite a pickle. It really makes you think really hard. Now, a lot of people would say, but Nick's the one who killed his parents. How do we know that? Has there been any reports by the police saying that Nick did kill his parents? And if he did, how? And what weapon was used that unalived Rob and Michelle Rayner? I'm just saying, whilst people will likely jump to conclusions say that but didn't the son kill the parents? Yet people don't ask, could there have been more people involved? And even if he was guilty of killing his parents, what was the weapon that was used and how were they killed? I don't think a lot of outlets would go into that much detail about such information. There is a lot more to the story than what the initial summary lays them out to be. There could be something else at play that not many people know about. But in the most of things, some people they leave this planet far too soon, and there are always going to be circumstances that will come out of nowhere and surprise us all. And yeah, it's very sad. At this moment in time, we should allow for a period of grieving for the friends and family of Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner as well. It's very, very unfortunate. Texas and Rubio are expected back on Capitol Hill as questions mount over boat strikes. The Trump administration's military actions against drug boats in the Caribbean have raised questions from Congress due to lack of explanation and transparency. Some lawmakers have expressed concerns over the legality and ethics of the strikes, which have killed civilians, raising worries about due process and the law of armed conflict. The Pentagon has been reluctant to release videos of a controversial strike that killed survivors, with inconsistent justifications provided by the administration. Now, whether there is a validly good reason for this, which I'm yet to hear, I'm leaving the door open for such explanation, or if this military action was all just because Venezuela has loads of oil and at every opportunity they try to use whatever reason they have to just seize the country of its oil supply and then take it back to the United States. That this only in major military powerhouse nations, where you're going to hear stories like this. No matter how big of an economical powerhouse they are and how big the military is, there are many countries that no matter how wealthy and how much resources they have, it will never be enough. There's always going to be someone that's going to say, "Oh, we did that because bad thing, very very bad thing," or maybe they'll point fingers at one of their leaders, saying, this man has been keeping the valuables from us, and it must be exposed immediately. Yet they don't apply the same logic to themselves, because they believe we're all high and mighty. We know what's right. Trust us, we know what's right. No, you don't. And just because you have the ability and sometimes authority to do something doesn't mean you should do it. And I guess, and of course, people will argue that no one should have authority to go in other countries and seize of their resources, or just attack infrastructure or local nearby communities, which, in my opinion, should not have happened to begin with. Because what reason do you have to attacking someone or something with a reason that's at best very vague or at worst no reason whatsoever? That's just me. And again, even if there is a justified or valid reason, and again, no, that's you can have the most purest of intention, but if you have a questionable or very problematic execution, that's when the critics and the concerns will start to rise. And I'm not defending this decision to go into Venezuela for whatever reason. You got to make it clear, not just to settle any rumors, but also for this on the grounds that for a country with one of the largest militaries in the world, who's not to say that this could happen to any other country, especially in the West? Now, there's no way that the US would send their military to a Western geopolitical nation, but what if they did? For some reason, out of nowhere, Trump announced that they're going to send the military to a country in Europe. And you can bring up the NATO membership all they want. Just know that NATO, majority of its funding, is coming from the United States. United States are the country that even if they allocate a smaller percentage of their GDP to fund NATO, the US still funds NATO much more than every other NATO member combined, which just comes to show the economical power that the US has, not within its own country or its borders, but the world. And even if other countries in Europe does allocate a lot more of their GDP to NATO, it's not going to be enough to outnumber the amount of funds that the US allocates and contributes to NATO, which is a concern that I have regarding always trying to negotiate with something with the US and only the US. Not saying it's not a bad thing that countries are working with the US on trade deals, diplomatic missions, or whatever. Countries are entitled to do that with the US. My problem is only with the US and no one else. And if in the event that the US says, nope, we're going to cut ties with you, where does that country go from there? That is not very, it's very unlikely to happen. But there are some countries that give a lot more praise to the US than a lot of the other countries combined, at most. British students will be able to study at European universities under the programme for the first time since Brexit. I want to read more on this, but for some reason, some of the news outlets just won't open, so yeah, that's quite annoying. But yeah, I think that even out of context, the Erasmus program is certainly a big deal to a lot of Europeans, because without Erasmus, EU university students wouldn't be able to study abroad from their home countries, wherever that might be, to go to the university that they want to study at, as well as other benefits and welfare funds, I think. I know that Erasmus is a lot more than just exchanging students between universities in the EU. I know that there are certainly some benefits, just can't think of any off the top of my head. I just had to look into it more, then I'll be certain. Otherwise, the UK will stop at nothing to ensure that they are rekindled with parts of the EU again, even if there's a handful of people that are advocating for the UK to continue its trade deals as it stands now, independent from the EU. But if that's what Westminster are wanting to do, then that's that. There's nothing stopping the UK government as it stands now. Given the majority they won at the last general election, we've got to wait till the next general election in 2029 before the UK as we know it changes drastically. Not forever, but it will change drastically at the next general election in the UK. Even if Reform UK does go past its peak, we will notice something for sure. FIFA slashed the price of some World Cup tickets for teams' most loyal fans following a global backlash, and some will get $60 seats for the final instead of being asked to pay $4,185. FIFA said Tuesday that $60 tickets will be made available for every game at the tournament in North America, going to the national federations whose teams are playing. Those federations decide how to distribute them to loyal fans who have attended previous games at home and on the road. The number of $60 tickets for each game is likely to be in the hundreds rather than thousands, in what FIFA is now calling a supporter entry tier price category. FIFA did not specify exactly why it so dramatically changed strategies, but said the lower prices are designed to further support travelling fans following their national teams across the tournament. The World Cup in North America will be the first edition that features 48 teams, up from 32, and is expected to earn FIFA at least $10 billion in revenue. But fans worldwide reacted with shock and anger last week on seeing FIFA's ticketing plans that gave participating country tickets in the lowest priced category. The cheapest prices ranged from $120 to $265 for group stage games that did not involve co-hosts the United States, Canada, and Mexico. FIFA had set those prices despite the co-hosts having pledged 8 years ago, when they were bidding for the tournament, that hundreds of thousands of... Why make a promise like that to begin with? Why say, oh, we're going to give $50 tickets to all fans that come all over the world, but then you're charging like thousands of dollars for each seat, and that's like in the middle category. The cheapest tickets are still in the hundreds, but still far more expensive than what the original bid promised to begin with. Well, a lot of federations want to host the FIFA World Cup. If any country is wanting to make a bid to host the tournament, at least give promises that you know for sure will happen, even when the unlikeliest and most devastating of circumstances are to be hit by them, and will hit the involving countries. And you know what? I'm glad the fans are outraged, because at least it's hard to ignore such a problem where you could easily make ticket pricing at least somewhat more affordable than what they are right now. Now, of course, it's not easy to make them dirt cheap. However, at least make it prices at a range that a lot of fans are able to afford. At least most of them. For thousands of dollars for a ticket for a World Cup match. That's just excessive. That's like rich people prices. What soccer football fan would pay that much money to watch a game? At a price like that, I would be expecting hospitality, seats with my own suites or other amenities like a dedicated toilet or bathroom specifically for the ticket holders. Thousands of dollars, you gotta deliver more than just a seat in the upper balcony and their own dedicated lounge. There's got to be a bathroom in there, just in case you don't want to use the public toilets provided by the stadium. And of course, there has to be a gourmet meal in that lounge or suite. That's what I expect for a ticket at that price. I don't blame soccer football fans. They should be outraged, and I'm glad they did. It may not be much what FIFA's done, but at least better to do something than to do nothing at all. So that's food safety warning issued over Dubai-style chocolate. The FSA has advised people with allergies to avoid Dubai-style chocolate in the United Kingdom after finding several products failed safety and labeling requirements. These popular bars have surged in demand over the past year, typically filled with pistachio, tahini, and shredded phyllo pastry, attracting growing interest from UK consumers. Testing showed underclad peanut and sesame in some products, with the Food Standards Agency reporting several items were labeled incorrectly, posing risks for consumers with allergies. Regulators and trade bodies urged food businesses, including retailers and importers, to act immediately as Jessica Merrifield of the Chartered Trading Standards Institute warned, failing to comply is highly dangerous. The FSA is reviewing sampling data from products currently on sale to check whether they meet UK food safety standards. And its guidance covers all allergies, advising people buying gifts for someone with allergies to avoid these bars. Well, something has to be done. I don't have anything else to say on that. It's just you can't. It's important not just for people that's selling consumer goods, but also for the consumer themselves to look at the ingredients in what the foods that they are buying. Because if you buy something not knowing that what's in it could be harmful to you, that's on you. And another thing, not a lot of people are made aware of this. However, maybe not now, maybe not next year, but maybe in the next decade, there will be a growing number of people that will raise awareness about particular ingredients in the food that we consume that are very harmful to our bodies and our anatomy to some extent. So even before then, it is important that if you're buying foods from anywhere, always look at what's in them. From sources, social media posts, and television programs I've watched, if any food has more than 5 ingredients, do not bother buying them. I mean, you can still buy food with more than 5 ingredients, but that's at least the recommended number of ingredients for any kind of foods that you're buying. As anything above 10 or 15 ingredients, stay clear of those foods immediately. That is for certain. More than 5, be cautious. More than 10 or 15, no, absolutely not. Stay clear of them. That's the recommendation I've heard throughout my years. And you know what? I agree with that. Also, if you don't want to buy food, make food at home. Start your own garden. Build a greenhouse. I don't see why not. I think a lot of climate activists will be behind that idea. They love to have their own greenhouse and grow their own food. So yeah, UK unemployment rose to 4-year high of 5.1% before budget. On Tuesday, the Office for National Statistics reported the unemployment rate rose to 5.1% in the 3 months to October, with 1.832 million people unemployed and actively seeking work. Raising employer costs, including the NIC's hike, have showed hiring this year with national living wage increases, unemployment rights bill measuring adding further pressure. Payroll data showed payroll employees fell by 38,000 in November to 30.3 million. Average regular earnings growth eased to 4.6%, and job listings declined for a second month while vacancies stayed flat. The Bank of England faces pressure to cut rates this Thursday as markets are pricing roughly 92% odds of a move, and most city forecasters expect a quarter point cut to 3.75%, with Andrew Bailey potentially decisive. Young workers in particular have a rise of 85,000 in unemployment aged 18 to 24 and 47,000 for 25 to 34, with a £1.5 billion investment for 50,000 apprenticeships and 350,000 opportunities. In the Discord group chat, I'm in with a guy from New York and this lad from the Scottish Highlands. The latter lad has shared a couple of screenshots about the employment rights bill, and the following as listed on this Instagram post that Risk11 has shared are as follows. And to 0-hour contracts, workers will gain guaranteed hours, reasonable notice of shifts, and pay for last-minute shift cancellations. Stronger statutory sick pay with no lower earnings limit or 3-day waiting period. Day 1, right to paternity leave and unpaid paternal leave. Right to claim unfair dismissal after 6 months. Ban on fire and rehire and fire and replace practices. Newer right to unpaid bereavement leave, including pregnancy loss. New protections against unfair dismissal for pregnant women and new mothers. Strong redundancy rules forcing employers to consult workers when 20 or more jobs are at risk at one workplace, or when large-scale redundancies happen across a company. Creation of a fair work agency to enforce workers' rights. At least these are the key details within the Employment Rights Bill that will come into effect quite soon as of this recording. And if you're watching this later, then what is it? Later than the 16th of December, that might have already been enacted right now. Make of that as you will. No matter what the current UK government are doing, they still have big shoes to fill, especially after the last 14 years of Tory-style rule government. I'll leave it at that. There's so much. There's a few to unpack there, but nonetheless, there will be a lot more rights given to workers, but it does come at a cost. That is what needs to be made aware. No matter what ideas you want to put forward and advocate to ensure that you have a say on what you do in your workplace, I agree. But just know that there is a cost coming along the way. And I'm not just talking financially. There's a lot more than financial costs. And what cost would that might be? Now, I'm not going to say that you're going to have to work longer hours, because I think something in the Employers' Right Bill might say something like that. If not, then honestly, I don't know on that. But I know there's a lot more costs besides finances. Just can't think of it at the top of my head. But at least I know money isn't the biggest problem with the Employers' Rights Bill. If there is another problem, US threatens countermeasures after EU fine on Musk's Rex. The Trump administration on Tuesday threatened a wide range of retaliatory measures against EU service providers, including possible fees or restrictions on foreign services if the firms continue what the USTR called discriminatory actions. The Office of the US Trade Representative, in a post on Twitter X, accused the EU and some of its member states of discriminatory and harassing lawsuits, taxes, fines, and directives against US services, while it said EU service providers operate freely in the US, pointing to Accenture, DHL, Siemens, and Spotify, among others. If the EU and EU member states insist on continuing to restrict, limit, and deter the competitiveness of US service providers through discriminatory means, the United States will have no choice but to begin using every tool at its disposal to counter these unreasonable measures, the USTR wrote. The threat comes after EU tech regulators imposed a fine on Elon Musk's Twitter X social media platform earlier this month, with the USTR saying it would use every tool at its disposal. Should responsive measures be necessary, US law permits the assessment of fees or restrictions on foreign services, among other actions, the Office of the USTR said in the post, which also pointed to other EU service providers, Amadeus, Capgemini, Mistral, Publicis, and SAP. Another classic battle between the US and the EU. No, I don't want to go bashing at the EU again and again and again, but even if I don't say anything about the EU in a negative way, there will be people that will say something about the EU, and especially they will point to the fact that the EU will go at all lengths and measures to ensure that whatever services or goods that they are providing do not benefit Russia whatsoever. Because that's a key point to notice. The EU and Russia are in this fierce rivalry with each other, or at least we're hearing a lot that the EU are doing what they can to ensure that they don't benefit Russia in any way, like doing trade with them, buying oil or natural gases off them. I'm not sure about other export trades, but at least energy, natural gas, and oil is what comes to mind when it comes to the EU trading with Russia, which they have ended, especially since Russian military entered Ukrainian territory and continuing military operations in whatever former Ukrainian territory that the Russian military are controlling. So the EU and the US going back and forth. Can just the EU just find them already? I'm not saying Twitter X is in the wrong here. Just do it and see what happens. But you will get a lot of people talking if you do it right now, EU. I asked this out of curiosity. I want to see how this goes. I hope it ends well. Most likely not. There's no harm in trying. And if there is harm, at least now you know for next time that you should be cautious. Whilst the EU are entitled to following laws that they have set for themselves and other EU states, other countries play by different rules. That you gotta be careful of, no matter where you stand in this situation. 3,000 glaciers to vanish yearly by 2040s. On Monday, an ETH Zurich-led study in Nature Climate Change found that under the roughly 2.7 degrees Celsius trajectory, about 3,000 glaciers will vanish annually between 2040 and 2060. Researchers used a global satellite database of 211,490 glaciers to model extinction where area falls below 0.01 square kilometers, or 1% of roughly 2,000 volume. Under the 1.5 degrees Celsius scenario, models show the peak occurs around 2041, with roughly 2,000 glaciers lost yearly, while small glacier regions, like the European Alps, could lose half their glaciers within 20 years. Communities that rely on glacier-fed water face Risks as glacier melt could boost sea levels by 25 centimeters this century and reduce irrigation, tourism, and ski industry supporting 2 billion people. Current pledges point to about 2.7 degrees Celsius of warming, meaning by 2100 only about 20% of glaciers remain versus around 50% at 1.5 degrees Celsius, with governments and policymakers determining emission trajectories. I'm not going to say that this is a scam or it's a hoax, and this is all fear-mongering, whilst there'll be people that will commit to that. Well, at least there will be people that say something like that, and what they will mean by that, by those words. Stories like this is one of the few reasons why I am skeptical about climate change concerns. Whilst our climate does change throughout the decades, centuries, and even millenniums, I've watched there was this TikTok video by I'm not gonna give out his name just to ensure that I respect his privacy, and if he does allow to be named publicly, I'm still not gonna mention his name because I want to ensure his protection and his safety because, well, not many people know about him now. I do fear for his safety, but that's just me. So, this lad on TikTok, I watched one of his videos. Something he said in one of those TikTok videos, it answers the point of, it does make a very good point regarding this story about the glaciers melting. Whilst there is likely going to be some glacier melting at some point in our lives, to say that average temperatures will rise continuously non-stop is it's not just naive, but again, like I said, it also goes into the territory of fear-mongering and glooming people into advocating to drastically change their lives for the name of protecting the world that we live in. Whilst you can protect your environment, plant trees, collecting litter from rivers, produce eco-friendly building material, I don't mind. I don't mind for initiatives like that. I'm all for that. But the concern that I have when it comes to climate changes, how do you expect people to follow these measures, even if people do want to commit to protecting and repairing the climate that we live in? There are certain aspects that are far beyond everyone's control, and even if people do put in these measures through policy making and world leaders advocating for such measures, once by the time that the average global temperatures has peaked, average global temperatures will go back down again. Can't be too sure when that moment in time will happen, but it won't happen for the next few years. When people say in the next few years the planet will get hotter, the average global temperatures goes back and forth. The last few decades will be colder, the next few decades will be hotter, and then the next few decades after that will be slightly colder than the previous few decades. Average global temperatures go back and forth like tick tock, tick tock. I don't mind people preserving their environments, conserving wildlife, and just providing more vegetation for the local cities or communities. However, when people, when I do hear in mainstream media about predictions of what the world's going to happen if we don't do these measures to ensure that these disasters don't happen, 80%, at least 80% of the time, people say this stuff to fear people into actually get on board with climate activism, to put in these measures to protect our climate. Even if there are aspects that are far beyond our control, even if people do want to protect the climate is going to change regardless, whether it be average temperatures get colder or if average global temperatures continue to get hotter year on year. That's my perspective. I'm not going to discourage people from speaking about information on this. Just if you're going to talk about climate change, preserving our environment, think about the aspects in our climate we can control and find ways of getting everyday people on board without actually using tactics that actually make people scared for their lives, thinking, no, our climate is dying. We're not going to live for the next few years. Yes, they will. They will live for the next few years, maybe next few decades, if there are people still being born, which there are, just not in Western world countries. But the point still stands. Whilst I have my skepticism about climate change, but that does not mean I'm not going to discourage people from advocating for such measures like it. I just have concerns about what aspects do we have control over, and can we make a change in our world for the better? And if you can, don't just throw predictions like they're going to happen as soon as possible. Because even if you do make predictions, and if they are partially true, there's still going to be hate, there's going to be anti-climate activists movements that will point out saying, oh, you predicted this a few decades ago, but yeah, here we are. The icebergs are still there, and the glacier's still there too. So why are you lying for? That's not to say they're lying. They're just going overboard with these predictions. Even if the slightest change in our climate does happen, there's still going to be people that are saying, oh, you're lying. No, they just went overboard a bit. Not they're trying to scare people. Well, sometimes. They just don't know how to get people on board. You don't need to scare people to get on board with something. You need to give people a reason to actually get in with the movement and find a personal connection with these people. Because, and I'm not saying everyone is like this, but I think everyone is just so full of themselves at times. I am at times, but at least I try. But at least I'm honest about it. And I also try to not make sure that everything's about me, even if it is about me. Well, again, I try. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I do try. Nonetheless, I've already said what I have to say without having to repeat myself. And yeah, I will leave it there. Make up your mind and the information on the story as you will. Just know that there are aspects in our world we cannot control. And if there are things we can control, how do you go ahead with it? And can you do it efficiently? Because you can do the best you can, but if it doesn't work out in the end, then you're doing something not right. And yeah, Myanmar junta says Suu Kyi in good health after son raises alarm. With an information vacuum around Myanmar, Kim Aris, son of Aung San Suu Kyi, and British national, said in Tokyo he has not heard from her in years and fears she could be dead already. After the 2021 military takeover, Aung San Suu Kyi, detained former leader and Nobel Peace Laureate, is serving a 27-year sentence while Aris believes she is held in Naypyidaw, Myanmar. Using the Loom December 28th elections, Aris met Japanese politicians and government officials to press them to reject the junta and increase pressure for his mother's release. A Myanmar junta spokesperson did not respond to calls seeking comment, and the military's prisoner release practices suggest Min Aung Hlaing could move or free Suu Kyi around the vote, Aris said. Warning of fading global attention, Kim Aris said, for all I know, she could be dead already, and urging using the brief election window to ease his mother's plight in Myanmar. Now, whilst I don't know much about what goes on in Myanmar, or heard much since a military initiative in Myanmar, have a feeling that something in Myanmar was going to go down. Whether it be bad, whether it be concerning, but I know there's something. I know there isn't much good happening in Myanmar right now, and I'm not going against current Myanmar, the Burmese government. I think ever since the military action or coup within Myanmar, I know that for certain there was a drastic change in leadership in the country, and there will be a lot of problems that would arise since that leadership change. All I ask is that whoever's been held hostage is set free, and families can reunite with each other again. I'm not just talking about the story alone, but I think this could apply to any other similar situation around the world. Anyone being held hostage in any country by any select groups of authorities, I do hope that whoever's been held hostage are set free and they are to be reunited with their families once more. It's very unfortunate. It's very sad. And that is it for the episode.